Ooh, what was that opening? Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we are going to do our first visual novel of the channel, our first M-rated game, too. So I want to go over some disclaimers first. This is a visual novel, and we will be going through the entirety of it eventually. So if you, at any point, are interested enough to play this game yourself, by all means, stop what you're doing and go play the game. I'd hate to ruin the experience for you, but I'll try to make it as entertaining as possible. This is Chaos Child, a spin-off / sequel to the first entry in the science adventure universe, Chaos Head, developed by 5PB. And if you're not aware of the other science adventure games in the series, I'm sure some of you might know Steins Gate, which is probably one of the most popular of the three games out. Robotics Notes is coming soon this year. I'm looking very forward to playing that. But Chaos Head never received an official translation, so we're still waiting on that and hoping and praying it comes out. And it was because I enjoyed Steins Gate so much that I decided to pick this game up to maybe tie me over until the actual original first game comes out, Chaos Head. You do not need to have played Chaos Head in order to understand Chaos Child. Now, I'll be narrating any bits that aren't voiced at all, and I'm not going to read all of the new entries that come up, but maybe some that I'm not necessarily familiar with, just so I have context going forward. One other fun bit of information: one of the writers for this game, Eiji Umehara, was actually called in to assist with writing some of the darker moments in one of the well-known animes going on right now, Re:Zero, Starting Life in Another World. Anyone familiar? Great anime. I recommend it to anyone. Based off of a light novel, very dark, so if his expertise was called in on that, then we're expecting a very dark game. Different from Steins Gate, but it should have that same magical storytelling. I'm hoping. But strap yourselves in, boys and girls. Well, I guess I shouldn't say boys and girls, because, again, this is mature, so hang on to your hats. It's about to get spooky. November 6th, 2009, AD, 10:26 p.m. It came without warning. Some alien invasion? Oh, by the way, all of the science adventure games take place within the same universe, so there may be terms or even people mentioned that are familiar in other games. Whoa. What was... Oh, shoot. Everyone's just gone. It was a magnitude 7.8 earthquake with an epicenter directly under the city. This disaster reduced one of Tokyo's busiest downtown areas to nothing in a single night. The high-rise buildings that had birthed so many trends and fads collapsed as if giving up on their role in society. Black fires spread throughout the city as individuals fell into the grip of the crowd's psychology. Their terror was magnified. Combined, all these things took many lives. The final death toll was 3,851. The final number of injured, 30,927. This event would later be known as the Shibuya earthquake. Even in all that destruction, people still suffered the most in their hearts. Some who had lost their families came together to share new resolve, while others, who'd been forced to watch their friends die, were driven by guilt to take their own lives. As a baby was miraculously reunited with his parents after 72 hours, a child in an evacuation shelter asked her dad, "When's mommy coming home?" He had no answer. Some of the wounded made it to the hospitals by looking at real-time updates on the web. Others saw people on the internet talking about the disaster as if it were a movie and were driven mad. A homeless man was saved from malnutrition by an organized volunteer group, but at the same time a middle school boy punched a self-centered volunteer who'd come to Shibuya to find himself in the face. Jeez. It was the first time in that boy's life he'd ever been violent. The psychological toll was incredible, and many of the survivors would later manifest symptoms similar to those associated with PTSD and post-traumatic stress disorder. The young were hit the hardest, and before long, the cause of those symptoms was given a name. Chaos child syndrome. Rebuilding happened at a feverish pitch never seen before. It felt inappropriate to say hang in there, but people felt that somebody had to do something. The new slogan was Shibuya, a city reborn, and no amount of money or manpower was spared in aiding the endeavor. The whole town was in the grip of a fever. In private, a leader of the redevelopment effort said, "This may sound unkind, but this frenzy feels like a town burying its grief by holding a festival." Building codes were rigorously evaluated with an eye toward earthquake engineering. Perhaps in an effort to emphasize the city's safety, security cameras were put up all over the town. Yeah, 'cause we need to see that earthquake coming. Shibuya would become a place where everyone could live in peace. But at the same time, a rumor began to spread about the earthquake. Something about this earthquake doesn't make sense. There were no aftershocks, and the damage had spread in a strange way. Harajuku and Ebisu, areas only a kilometer away from Shibuya, suffered few casualties and even fewer collapsed buildings. This damage pattern had never been discovered, never been observed in any prior earthquake. And so more than a few pundits claimed the Shibuya earthquake must have been artificial. More than anything, some of the survivors all said the same thing. "I saw a white light. I heard a sound like a ringing in my ears." Too many people experienced this for anyone to laugh it off, but no cause of those phenomena was ever found. It was just more evidence to those who believed that something about the earthquake had been wrong. Then 6 years after the strange earthquake, in 2015, something else was about to attract attention in the reborn city of Shibuya. Ooh. Fetus D. Yikes. September 7th, 2015, Sunday night.
はい。ではいつも通り3分くらい募集をかけるんで、適当によろです。
The second he spoke, the comment box started to fill. Yuma Utani watched it for a few seconds and then saw the request. When does Haru tell us she's dating somebody? He smiled to himself. Just what he wanted. Most of the requests were about hot actors or cute idols. His audience was so stupid that it was so easy to tell exactly what they were going to ask. The problem was always whether the name that came up was someone he knew. That was a question of luck and of how popular they were. But Haru, her name was Haruko something or other. She was fine. Just a few days ago, he'd forced himself to go to an event he'd rather have skipped and seen it for himself.
Yes.
Satisfied, Utani got up to get some snacks like he always did. He lived in a one-bedroom condo located 8 minutes from Shibuya Station. Cost 150,000 yen per month. It had been built after the earthquake, so the furnishings and layout were modern. A little more room would have been nice, but compared to the 40,000 yen per month place he'd lived in last year, it was heaven. Yeah, I bet. I'd take a modern place.
もうちょっと便利なところに引っ越すか。
You do you. At 21 years old, Utani felt satisfied for the first time in his life. Yikes, he's 21? Looking good. In 4th grade, he'd gotten big into online gaming and stopped going to school. I was about to say, hey, that's cool, and then you ruined it with the school part. Eventually, he'd stopped leaving his room altogether. Then he'd gotten addicted to drugs that made him sleepy, but did nothing else. Once seeing only darkness in his future, he'd planned to commit suicide. In the chaos after the earthquake 6 years ago, he'd finally managed to leave his room, but his family had already given up on him. After he'd failed his entrance exams, he went to live on his own in Shibuya, and he hadn't spoken to his parents since. As far as they knew, he'd failed the entrance exams 3 times in a row. In fact, he hadn't even gone to the tests after the first time. Jeez, man. There wasn't anything he wanted to learn in college, or any companies he wanted to work for badly enough. He had no goal in life. At all. But things were different now.
アットちゃんにもたまには本当のことが書かれてるもんだ。チーズでいいか。
@chan is @channel, so it's like Twitter or Twitch. You can make comments there. People talk about stuff. They had that term in Steins Gate as well. So there are terms that are fictional that mirror other terms, and you just need to understand the basic gist of it in order for the jokes to make sense. Sounds like he's a streamer. He took a block of cheese, cheap, he'd bought at the supermarket out of the fridge. Usually, he'd never ate anything this cheap. But on Nikonia live streaming, oh, he is a streamer, it wasn't just what you said. How you looked when you said it also mattered. Utani wasn't a good-looking man, let alone a cute girl. He was just a plain old guy, and so to keep his program popular, he needed to make them think that he was poor, barely managing to scrape by, in fact. That's why he kept the area around his PC and the parts of his apartment that you could see with his webcam completely plain. I never heard of that method. Usually it's the exact opposite here. Last month, he'd finally reached his goal of 4K viewers. For a man with nothing going for him like Utani, this was extremely unusual. 3 months ago, he'd guessed the winners of a popularity contest a certain idol group was holding, as well as their total number of votes. That must have really paid off. After that, his numbers had been going up steadily. Late last month, when his streams had appeared at the top of Nikonia's page, he'd seen a huge increase. Right now, he'd gotten over 4,500, and it was quite possible he'd break 5K by the end of the month. It was around late last year when he'd started to wonder about his power. It was a certain rumor on one of Atchan's occult boards that made him really start to realize what he had. Is he going to be a mutant X-Men? The name he'd chosen for his stream subtly reflected this. Then I learned that I can see the future. Oh! He's an Esper. That's cool. Not sure what I'd do if I had Esper powers. He took out a knife to cut the cheese. Oh god, I just have a childish mind right now. There was a strange sound.
Huh?
He thought he'd just imagined it when... Knock, 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 knock. He heard it again. It was coming from the door. Someone was clearly knocking on his door.
Huh? 密林か?
Jungle, maybe. Jungle? What's tips? Jungle. Jungle. Oh, okay, yeah, it's like a parody of Amazon, so... Oh, can't say that. Well, whatever. Everyone knows it. I don't know if it's okay for me to say it on video, but whatever, it's there now. Jungle, maybe? Suspicious, he walked toward the door to answer, then checked the clock. It was 11:41 p.m. Not exactly normal delivery hours.
なんだよ。つか、生放送中だっつうの。
He tried to ignore it. But... The knocking continued. It was the same rhythm at the same pace. As if the visitor's goal wasn't to come inside, but simply to make that sound. Utani felt a bit creeped out. He decided to go to the intercom camera and see who it was, but then he realized that would be pointless. Only the auto-locking door on the first floor had a camera. The door to Utani's room on the 5th floor had an intercom but no camera. Utani gave up.
くそ。つか、用ならインターホン押せよ。
Sorry.
酔っ払いか?
No, the knocks were too steady for that. And there was no voice yelling at him to open up. Oh man, the men in black are coming. He'd seen this door a million times, but suddenly it looked somehow different. Someone he didn't know was on the other side of the wall, demanding entry in the middle of the night. Somehow, this made the door seem intimidating. Like zoinks. Utani thought he might look through the peephole to see who was outside. He was then disgusted to find himself too scared to even get close to the door. Wait, the intercom didn't have a camera, but it did have a microphone. He turned toward the living room, so he could use the intercom and find out what they wanted. Utani, it's me. Sorry to come by so suddenly. He stopped when he heard that voice. It's me. I'm very sorry to bother you at this hour. Utani tried to remember who the speaker was, but he found he couldn't. But from the tone of voice and the words, they probably weren't a weirdo. When they said, "I'm sorry," it sounded like they really meant it. Utani sighed softly with relief and then realized he was still carrying the knife he had been using to cut the cheese. Open a window. It suddenly felt stupid to feel so nervous. And the music brings us back. He quickly laid the knife on top of the sink.
はいはい、今開けます。どちら様ですか?
It's me, don't you remember? The voice simply repeated itself. But who are you? Utani whispered to himself as he opened the door. Utani narrowed his eyebrows at the people standing there. He looked them up and down, and then looked at their faces again. Their eyes met.
あんたら、どこのどなた?
Oh, geez. Utani suddenly felt a piercing headache. Did he get neuralized? Utani closed his eyes and put his right hand up to his temple. He could feel the blood pounding in his veins through his fingers. He staggered and quickly put his other hand against the wall to keep from falling over. The pain was like the old days when he'd overdosed on antidepressants, but much more intense. Not a feeling I want to know. Hang in there, guy. He grit his teeth again. I think that's against the pain, and dug his nails into the wall that was holding him up. As he waited for the pain in his fingers to help dull the pain in his mind, Mr. Utani, are you okay? He heard a voice he'd heard many times before and felt a concerned hand on his shoulder. He somehow managed to ignore the pain and open his eyes. A worried face was peering down at him.
大丈夫。最近たまにあるんだ。
Overwork, perhaps? You've been so busy lately, you shouldn't push yourself too hard.
相変わらず心配性だな、お前は。大丈夫だよ。さあ、入ってくれ。
He opened his mouth as wide as he could and moaned, trying to ease the pain as he led his important guests inside. As he turned his back to his guests, he told himself that it had been a long time since he'd seen them. Or maybe not. It couldn't have been more than 2 months since they'd last met. It only felt long because he'd wanted to see them so badly.
そうだ。せっかく来てもらったのにすまん。生放送中なんだよ。
While he was out here, he decided he would cut some cheese for himself and his guests. I can't. Oh, don't worry about us.
いや、お前ら相手にそういうわけにもいかないだろ。ん?
I simply must cut the cheese for you. What's wrong?
いや、なんでもない。
The blade wasn't cutting into the cheese. That's strange, he told himself as he pushed down with more force. That sound. He cut into its surface, and it made an unpleasant sound he'd never heard before. But no matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't go any further. If I feel anything solid in my cheese, I'm throwing it out. Just saying. Confused, he yanked the knife back and forth like a saw, but it only cut in slightly deeper. It was as if there was something hard inside the cheese. And even though he'd only just taken it out of the fridge, it was slightly warm.
くそ、なんだよこれ。
I hate that I know what he's doing. Irritated, he slammed the handle of the knife against the cheese. But all it did was bash it in a little. He couldn't cut through it.
ふざけんなよ。
I'll help you. His guests must have heard the sound because they rushed over. They had another knife. When did they get that out? There's a trick to cutting this thing. They put the knife up against the cheese and began to move it with a practiced hand. It sounds like your work is going well. They smiled at Utani, their voices slightly low. Utani realized that they were trying to keep their voices from being picked up by the streaming microphone, and lowered his voice as well.
Ah.
Yeah, that's considerate of you guys. He grinned and nodded. His guest had introduced him to a firm that handled advertising space for popular websites, which had been giving him regular work. His reputation had quickly spread throughout the small web advertising industry, and soon he was getting more and more offers.
流行を予想することが肝なこの仕事は天職だよ。出来レースみたいなもんだ。
With future vision, yeah. Then why do these streams?
一言では言いづらいな。強いて言えば、自分がどこまでいけるか試したい、みたいな感じなんだけど。
That's right. His power wasn't meant to be wasted on jobs that anyone could do.
誰も経験したことないから、誰かに聞くってわけにいかないだろ。だから自分でやれるだけやってみたいっつうか。ってかっこよすぎか、これは。
No, it's wonderful, I think. And done. After he'd smacked it a few times, the cheese was a little funny looking, but the even slices were lined up neatly on the plate.
悪いな、働かせて。
It's nothing. Go on. I'll wait until your stream is finished.
ああ、冷蔵庫の中適当に見繕ってくれていいから。ああ、静かにな。
Utani took his cheese back to his seat and saw a flood of comments reading, "He's late!" and "Did he log off?" What should have only been 3 minutes had turned into more than 15. Utani put a bite of the cheese in his mouth and began to chew loudly.
申し訳ない。この安売りセールしていたチーズがありえないくらい硬くて。
He apologized to the camera, remembering to keep up the act of being poor and starving. And as he hoped, the comments started to come in. This is weird. I heard you have new hobbies. What happened? I'm very worried. Yeah, stop it. It's disgusting. I can't read comments and watch the... What? Utani's face took on a confused expression. The comments were strange. He thought there might be something on the camera, but he turned around and saw only his fake poor room.
どうしました?
He spoke into the camera, but the comments still didn't make any sense, and they were coming in faster. Maybe there was a problem with the camera. He reached his right hand out towards it. In an instant, his headache was back. It was the same pain as before. No, worse. He closed his eyes and jerked forward, banging his head against the desk. But the pain in his head was so bad, he didn't even feel it. He tried to hold his head in his hands, but for some reason his right hand wouldn't move. So instead, he pushed his other hand up against his temple. It felt squishy. The vein was incredibly swollen and it felt like rubber. and each time he felt his blood pulse through it, there was an unpleasant sensation in his fingers. He stamped his feet against the floor, hoping to find some small escape from the pain, but it didn't even get slightly better. It was then that he realized he was crying. He could feel the tears coming from his eyes. The pain was moving there now, too. Unable to bear it, he opened his eyes. He gasped. Oh, he really did it. The whole scene appeared in front of him like some kind of awful magic trick. He suddenly heard the sound of something wet dripping onto the floor. His eyes reflexively turned toward it. His right arm was gone at the elbow. Ah! And the stump was gushing blood. Yeah, he's dead. There was a pool of it on the floor, and the sound he heard was the new blood splattering onto it.
Huh?
'Tis just a flesh wound. No, but for real, he's dead. Utani didn't understand what had happened to him. What was going on? He'd just gone to check on a knock at the door. The pain screamed within him, and any sense of pain in what remained of his right arm was overcome by the pain in his head. He felt nothing from his arm at all, even though he saw the blood dripping on the floor. That's some illusion. What the hell was going on? He blinked and forced his aching eyes to function as he looked around the room. Oh, jeez. On top of his desk, he found the rest of his arm. It was sitting on a plate. At first, it looked like it was still in one piece, but it wasn't. It was neatly sliced into uniform pieces. Each piece was about 1 centimeter wide, and the slices moved neatly towards the fingers. This is way too detailed. They sat upon the plate in roughly his arm's original shape. Miraculously, he saw there was no blood on the tip of his index finger. I would not call that miraculous. He still didn't understand that it was really his own arm, but sheer disgust at what he saw caused him to leap out of his chair. What was this? What kind of prank was this? The contents of his stomach flooded into his mouth. He vomited. The pink fluid splashed against the desk. He saw something solid in the middle of it. It was a thumb. It was covered in bite marks, saliva, and stomach acid, but horribly, he remembered it. What? When had he put that into his mouth? In his pain-filled mind, he suddenly heard a sound he'd never heard before. Each time he heard the sound, the pain in his head got worse. He turned toward the camera, hoping for an answer to what was happening. But of course, there was none to be found. The screen was still filling with comments, but his eyes were too filled with tears for him to read them. Oh, man. As the whole world turned red, Utani didn't even realize that his lips were turning purple. His lips had turned purple from lack of oxygen, but were stained red with blood from his severed thumb, which he had chewed himself. As he tried to fight the pain, he began to fall unconscious, and tears fell from his eyes. The tears seemed pink to him. Utani was weeping blood. He died, still facing the camera. His guests watched the chain of events unfold, then silently headed for the door. Just before they left the room. Goodbye, they said as if nothing at all was wrong, and shut the door. Oh, what a way to start. I'm bored, go back to the usual stream. I saw that last comment. My God, online is so desensitized. What an opening. Ugh, September 19th, 2015, Friday night. You know what? I need a break. So, we're gonna save here. Thank you guys for watching. I want to give a shout out to a couple of new subscribers. Our subscriber count just doubled since yesterday, so thank you so much for your support. Emma, Crunchy Churro, and most recently Gwazi. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoy the content. Gwazi, I did get your comment. I'm probably going to try to look into streaming on Twitch soon. Might be a better platform there. Maybe not for visual novels, but I can try something else. It'd be nice to just go at my own pace with Ukami as long as I can, but I can only do this for an hour or less using Share Factory. Mad props for it, by the way. But thank you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please leave a like and subscribe if you like it. And I'll see you soon. See ya.